Here we go with part two of intelligence and testing. We're going to talk about how we assess intelligence, and we're going to try to get this in under 2 minutes. So, here we go. Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about mental age. So, mental age is something that this guy named Binet, who was a psychologist in France, who was wanted to figure out why school children who were slower, who needed extra help, and so he came up with this intelligence test to try to get some help for these children who needed help. And so he came up with this idea with mental age. So it said basically like an 8-year-old uh, who performed on average with his peers would have a mental age of 8 years old, right? So his mental age would be comparable if he was on average with everybody else's age. So if an 8-year-old had a mental age of like a 6-year-old, then we know that this guy would be slow and would need extra help. So he originally created it so that we could identify those who needed extra help and give them the extra help that they needed, and so that they would not fall to the wayside in society. He kind of worried about labels being placed on people as a result of these intelligence tests, but um, his hope was that it would help give these people some help. But that's mental age. So mental age is what age you are mentally, and it works really well with children. It doesn't work so well with adults, right? Because what's the difference between a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old, right? Can you really compare those mental ages? But with children, it works really well. The next is Stanford Binet, a psychologist from Stanford University in California, took Binet's intelligence test and modified it a bit, and it's referred to as much more popular test and well known today as the Stanford Binet test. And again, this is the intelligence test that Binet originally came up with when he was learning about the mental age, modified it a bit. It had practical problems, more analytical problems on it, had a combination of both. And so this is just an intelligence test, right? And then an intelligence quotient is when we take your mental age and divide it by your chronological age, multiply it times 100, and you're going to get a number to get rid of any decimals there. And so this number, an average would be 100, so it might be 85 to 115 is average in there. But it's your mental age divided by mental age divided by chronological age. Chronological age is whatever age you actually have. Um, how do so that's intelligence test. So this would be an IQ test, right? So IQ tests and this mental age divided by chronological age again doesn't work for adults, but it works really well for children. Achievement tests and aptitude tests. So there's two types of tests when we're talking about intelligence. Achievement tests what you know. So when you take a test at the end of this unit or the AP exam, it tests what you know, what you've learned. Okay, so that's an achievement. How well have you achieved in your quest for knowledge? An aptitude tests how well you will do. So it tries to predict the future, tries to predict your aptitude in the future, right? Your ability to do something in the future. So an aptitude test tries to be predictive. An example of an aptitude test is the SAT or the ACT. These try to predict how well you're going to do in college. An achievement test, an example, is the AP exam or the test at the end of this unit. The most common intelligence test that's used today is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Test, the WAIS, the WAIS, and it's used most commonly today to test intelligence. Some test terms that you need to be aware of is standardization. Standardization is when your score is compared against a pre-tested group. So you compare your score versus a pre-tested group and how you fall in that against the pre-tested group tells you, how you rank. And this pre-tested group usually forms in what's called a normal curve, which we've seen before, right? A normal curve is a statistical situation where the mean, the median, and the mode are all right in the middle, right? And this is where we get the standard deviations, right? Where we got standard deviation here, And we have 68% of all people in a normal curve between one standard deviation. If we're talking about intelligence or an IQ test, normally the mean median mode is 100, the standard deviation is 15, and so 68% of the population has an IQ score between 85 and 115. Okay, so that's what a normal curve is once again. Right, 2 standard deviations, by the way, right, was 95%, just as a review for 2 standard deviations, and then 2% down here for 3, and then even less. Now, when you're being tested, you want to look for something that's called reliability. Will the test give you like scores the more times you take it? So when you take the SAT, if you retake the SAT, if you take it more than once, you're not taking the exact same test again. You're taking another test. It's a completely different test, and it's been compared and tested versus each other, so that it's reliable. So that no matter what version of the test that you take, the test you should get similar results, and that would make it reliable. So reliable is when you get consistent results with something. So it's consistently will show you what you show you. And then we also look for a thing called validity. And validity is, there's 2 types of validity. But validity more or less is, does it do what it's supposed to do? Is it valid? If I gave you a psychology test and I asked you questions about World War I, that wouldn't be a very valid test, right? Because it doesn't show me what I want to know. It doesn't test what it's supposed to test. I'm asking you questions about psychology. I'm testing you about history. So if I ask you about psychology, I'd have to ask you questions about psychology. If I ask you questions about intelligence in psychology, I'd have to ask you questions about intelligence in psychology to have a test on it. All right, so it's more specifically content validity and predictive validity. Again, content validity is kind of the situation I just described. If I ask you about psychology, I need to get questions about psychology. I shouldn't have math problems on there. And then predictive validity is, how well does this predict what I want it to predict? So for instance, predictive validity of the SAT. How well does the SAT predict how well I'm going to do in college? Okay, so these are some key terms here with intelligence. Thanks.